Before we look at Daniel chapter 7 about the vision of the beast, we need to keep in mind that the book of Daniel was written in two languages, Aramaic and Hebrew. Chapters 1 through to 6 were mostly written in Aramaic, which was the language of the Babylonians and had in fact become the lingua franca of the Middle East by the 7th and 6th century BC. Chapters 7 through to 12 were mostly written in Hebrew. Chapters 1 to 6, mostly in Aramaic, is what God revealed primarily to a Gentile king, Nebuchadnezzar, concerning the history of the world kingdoms. Chapters 7 to 12, mostly in Hebrew, is what God revealed to Daniel in visions concerning the same world kingdoms, with further details on several of these kingdoms as well as the coming of the Messiah. There are mysteries that are revealed to the house of Judah that is not revealed to the Gentile world. Therefore, as God's people, we have access to the news behind the news. To him who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches, God's house, that we might be a people prepared and ready for the Lord. So far, we have seen how chapters 1 to 6 were very plain in language and was easy to discover practical and spiritual lessons. However, chapter 7 onwards is different. There is a lot of symbolism involved and sounds very much like the book of Revelation. As a result, it may seem quite overwhelming to the reader. In order to unlock the remaining chapters of Daniel, we need to apply a very important principle. God uses the language of creation, which becomes the language of signs and symbols, which then becomes the language of God's redemption. What does that mean? Let's first look at what the language of creation is. It is in the account of creation found in Genesis chapter 1 and 2 that God said, "Let there be light," and thus made the heavens and the earth, the dry land and the seas, grass, herbs that yield seed, trees that yields fruits, sun, moon, and the stars, fishes, birds, animals, and man. These become the language of creation. God used those as signs and symbols as his secret codes to reveal or conceal truth according to the attitude of the receiver. This is clearly seen in the ministry of Jesus as he spoke in parables. The disciples asked Jesus, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" Jesus answered and said, "Because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. Therefore I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand." In Matthew chapter 13, we have the parable of the sower. It says from verse 3, "Behold, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seed fell by the wayside, and the birds came and devoured them. Some fell on stony places, where they did not have much earth, and they immediately sprang up, because they had no depth of earth. But when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. And some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprang up and choked them. But others fell on good ground and yielded a crop, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears to hear, let him hear." Jesus himself interprets the parable in verses 19 to 23. The language of creation is seen in the sower, seed, and the different grounds. Let's first take a look at the sower. God created man on the 6th day. The sower is thus used symbolically to represent either God himself or believers who minister the word of God. Secondly, we have the seed. Seed is seen in creation on the 3rd day. It is used symbolically to speak of the word of the kingdom. And thirdly, the different grounds are used to represent the different conditions of the heart and the attitude of the hearers. The moral and message of the parable is that all those who sow the word of the gospel of the kingdom have to recognize that there will be different responses in the hearts of the hearers. The fault is not in the seed word, but the fault is in the ground of the hearers' hearts, and the results depend on their attitude. It is therefore this principle that will be used to unlock the mysteries contained in Daniel chapters 7 to 12. Let's review. God uses the language of creation, which becomes the language of signs and symbols, which then becomes the language of God's redemption. Daniel chapter 7 verse 1 reads, "In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts." We must take note that the chapters in the book of Daniel are not all in chronological order. King Belshazzar was slain and Babylon fell by the end of chapter 5, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom. Chapter 6 gave us the account of Daniel in the lion's den under the reign of King Darius. It was therefore before the fall of Babylon, in the first year of the reign of King Belshazzar, that Daniel received the vision. In the next video, we will be unlocking and interpreting the vision of the beast.